is the Sensitive CEO Show, igniting sensitive entrepreneurs to grow your heart-centered business. I'm your host, Rose Cox, and this podcast shares with you inspiring and thought-provoking conversations for sensitive entrepreneurs wanting to grow a sustainable online business in a way that feels exciting and aligned with your soul. Along with my carefully curated expert guests, we share science-backed advice, proven strategies, and the systems we use to succeed in our businesses and our lives as highly sensitives, introverts, and empaths. And by the way, if you would like to be updated on when each episode is released, feel free to subscribe to the short and sweet newsletter. You'll also get weekly recommendations and tips, especially for HSPs, empaths, and introverts. To subscribe, pop on over to the website sensitiveceo.show or rosecox.com/pod. Now on to today's show. Hey, it's Rose, and welcome to another episode of the Sensitive CEO Show. And in this week's episode, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Bonnie Casamassima. Bonnie is the founder of Intuitive by Nature, which supports people in connecting more fully with their innate intuitive abilities to nurture their well-being, productivity, and intentional quality of life. Welcome, Bonnie. It's wonderful to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so wonderful to be on, and hello to all of those listening.
I would love for you to share a bit about your background and your experience from being a research professor to highly sensitive, intuitive, empathic medium.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. It's been quite the journey. I'll say that. Yeah, and I guess in a nutshell, I'd spent the last, 10 years or before waking up to my intuitive abilities as a researcher and professor. I worked both in the corporate world and then toward the end working as the professor, working predominantly with graduate students on their own research work. So very analytical. I think I even sent out a spreadsheet to people asking them what grad school I should go to way back when, just to paint the picture. And long story short, started meditating one day for stress reduction, and it felt right deep in my body. So I kept showing up to that feeling and, pan forward, a lot of life events happened and a lot of healing and inner work and all of that as well. One day during meditation, started receiving really clear visuals in my mind's eye, and it scared the crap out of me at first. I was very startled by it, but yet still, even though my analytical mind was really scared, I felt so calm and loved deep in my body, deep in my bones. So in a nutshell, I started just to keep trusting that feeling and followed it through the breadcrumbs. And about 7 years or so in, which is where we are now, I'm honored to have blended those two worlds and done a research project on intuitive connection. So it's been quite the journey, but it's been wonderful to really embody all those layers.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I know the topic of our conversation today is all about your research project. So can you share a little bit about that with the audience, please, Bonnie?
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of jump right in, I want to give a huge shout out to a woman that helped me with the data analysis. So Celeste Sample was phenomenal with helping me with the data analysis. And so I just want to give a huge shout out and credit to her as well, even though I'm honored to be having this conversation. So in a nutshell, it interviewed 50 people from all over the world on their connection journey as they tuned into their intuition, their intuitive abilities, their ability to see, smell, taste information beyond what we often let ourselves connect with. With it, it's used a framework just to keep it super high level, a framework called grounded theory, which really it seeks first to ask people their lived experiences. What was it like for you when you started receiving visuals? What was it like for you when you connected to people that maybe that had transitioned beyond physical bodies, right? What was it like for you to tune in to this deep inner wisdom for your business planning or your decision making? And at first, just asks these open-ended questions and then identifies, looking at all 50 of those conversations, did any patterns emerge? Were there any similarities or differences? And then from that, how could we take that information to maybe support other people on their journey, connecting with their own intuition? So that's a nutshell of it. I'm happy to dive deeper in any areas.
Yeah, gosh, I'd love to ask the 50 people, you said they were from different countries. Can you share some of the countries and maybe some of their backgrounds as well, if you knew that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all anonymized. So obviously I can't share any personal information. But what I will share is everybody was over at least 18. So they were all adults and it was all voluntary. And we had people from all walks of life. So we had, doctors, therapists, CPAs, nurses, people that were practicing mediums or psychics. We had people that were coaches. We had someone who was a prison warden, right? Like all walks of life sharing in this information. It was really such an honor and powerful to see how were people really tuning in to their intuition in their everyday lives? And what did that look like for them? So it was predominantly United States, but we also had those from the UK, had a number from Australia, as well as one from Canada as well. So kind of all over. And then one from India as well. So all over.
And what were some common themes that came from the findings?
Oh my goodness. Quite a lot. What really stood out was the why people shared they connected with their intuition. And for the most part, those that we had interviewed, or I conducted all the interviews, and then Celeste really helped with her brilliant work with helping with the data analysis and then helping to take it into human terms, right? Some of the key ahas were why people shared they connected with their intuition. And, we had some people share, it helps with their decision-making process. They use it for another sense in where are they wanting to go in their next step for business, for example, or to feel more connected to their ancestors who had transitioned, right? So there were a lot of reasons people shared that they connected, but what was really fascinating is those that had fostered a very intentional relationship with their intuition, they reported being calmer, less stressed, more in tune with their inner wisdom, happier, more at ease. Life just seemed to flow better. And these patterns kept emerging over and over and over, while the journey to get there maybe had a lot of struggle or, feeling of, should I share this with the world? As people are really tuned in, they described it as a superpower. I think much like those that identify as highly sensitive empaths, right? I think we maybe were told our lives like, oh, you're too sensitive. Why are you taking that as such a big deal? And when we really get to tune into ourselves and do that inner work, we can identify that as a superpower. It's such an incredible way to connect. So that's one of the biggest ahas is really the why. I'm happy to share a little bit more, but I want to kind of pause there and not talk for too long.
Oh, no, I'd love you to share more.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing we found that was very fascinating is that intuition came in a very wide range of ways for people. So it came and connected with them through all senses. So sometimes people would, for example, they would smell roses in a room where there were no roses. And in certain situations, the person that we interviewed in this scenario, she knew that it was her mother connecting with her. And she felt an overwhelming sensation of love. She felt almost tingles in her body. And so that information connected with her most through smell. Another person would share, they would see things in their mind's eye, such as, when I'm doing an intuitive reading, that's how the visuals come through for me. And it can almost feel like a dream, but you're awake when those images are coming through. Other people shared it came through for them as a gut feeling. Like, I can't explain why. I just know I'm really drawn to this person. So they followed that gut feeling and they ended up getting married and stayed married for 40 years. Other people would taste certain tastes and other people would hear, things like voices, so it comes through all senses. And I think that's something that's really powerful for people to hear and acknowledge, that it doesn't mean that the only way to connect with your intuition or information beyond what many of us let ourselves connect with our five senses. It's not just, oh, I see earthbound spirits walking around, right? It's so much more than that. It can be that, and that absolutely was something that came through, but it's so much more. And to really trust what resonates for you in your body. And should you choose, you can really embody that as a superpower and that interconnectivity of it. It's really beautiful.
Did you find that people had more than one sense that was more common, or like, can someone smell things but also have gut feelings?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That was a big pattern that we saw, is a lot of stacking or overlapping. So maybe they would feel a gut feeling and then they would also, have a smell or hear a sound. So one thing that's really important here is that the people shared over and over and over again that it felt very grounded, very loving, very rooted in their bodies. It doesn't mean that that's the only way that it came through body sensations, but it's really important to have that discernment to make sure you're really grounded and in that presence. But absolutely, I can share, for my personal example, like I experience things through visuals in my mind's eye, but also through body sensations. It's called clairsentience. Maybe you get goosebumps or hair standing on the back of your head, right? Or back of your neck. Maybe your head too, if you've got shorter hair, but on the back of your neck. Yeah. So absolutely, to answer your question, very much a range of ways. And as people tuned in and continued that self-trust with how that information came through for them. And again, people would share, I use this as a tune in for my business planning. I really tune in, what clients am I aligned to support, all the way to, I'm really missing my ancestors that have passed away. I want to connect with them more fully, and everything in between. As people share that they developed that intentional relationship more and more fully, it's almost as if more and more of those senses turned on for them. So maybe it started as body sensations, and the more they tuned in, they would start to hear, someone say their name, or they would see visuals in their mind's eye, or also in their dreams. People would have a lot of vivid dreams where the dreams then came true in waking life. So it's really incredible. It's incredible what we're so connected to. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's something that I'm so fascinated in as well, which I think a lot of HSPs are, and especially empathic HSPs.
Absolutely.
How could people develop it? So for someone like myself, I sense things, but I also, I've had smell, definitely the gut feeling, not so much the visuals. The dreams are huge. But how could I, or someone listening who has similar experiences, really develop their intuition?
What a great question. Absolutely. What we saw over and over and over in the research were two things. One was really honoring your self-trust, which can be quite the journey when many of us have been told that the answer is outside of us our whole lives, from parent to child or teacher to students, to really, especially as highly sensitives, right? Really tune in and keep fostering that self-trust. One of the ways people shared they did that was through getting things in visual 3D reality for them. So if they had a gut feeling that turned out to be true, they would write that down as a bullet point, and they would keep a running list of all these times, or they had a dream that was a premonition dream. It came true the next day or a few weeks or 6 years later. Each time, just go back and reflect, when were those moments where I had that intuitive knowing, that intuitive connection, and get it down in a space that you can see regularly. It helped to embody that self-trust. The second key theme that came through was the power of being in community with others, talking about these incredible abilities with it. A community, I know it was the top thing that came through. It's the being witnessed, being able to share these experiences. And while each person's experiences are different, being able to have that space held for them to know that this is something that they felt deep in their bones, deep in their heart, and to be witnessed in community sharing similar experiences was really powerful for that embodiment.
Any specific type of community? I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but if someone's not quite sure how to find the right community to be in, what would you suggest?
Trust your gut. I always say, but ones that are specifically talking about intuition, it's specifically talking about, I've had these experiences, or I've had really vivid dreams. Like dream circles are something that can be really powerful. Those that are leading intuition mentorships, right? Where you're really like coming together to talk about that and embody that. What we did see very often in the research is while there were experiences that were very powerful for people, like this is an undeniable experience. I just saw, my grandfather walking around. Those were a little less common versus people it's like trusting this series of subtle nudges throughout their, a few years of really like, I can't explain why, but meditation feels right? I'll go back to my story. I can't explain why, but it feels really calm and grounding in my body, in my bones. So I'm just going to keep showing up and keep trusting that nudge. And then, boom, one day visuals start to come in. It's really a series of trusting those nudges and really honoring yourself and that self-trust in the process and sharing it in very safe spaces. I feel like those spaces are becoming more and more available. Maybe it's just the world that I live in. So that's what I'm around. But the fire in my belly is let's talk about this and use it in our everyday modern lives. Certainly cultures from around the world have done this for millennia. Somewhere along the way, most often a few hundred years ago, we have been taught to shut these down. And I feel the more we're able to really share our experiences, that the more we get to create that space for others to share. We are far from alone, very far from alone. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the world that I live in too, but I've noticed so many more communities popping up and so many more like-minded people being attracted to each other. And I don't know if it's because there seems to be a lot of awakening happening in the world right now, or if we attract it because that's where our beings are going, our souls going in that direction. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing with that, one, we have the technology. I know we were talking about this before we started recording. We're in completely different parts of the world, and we get to have this lovely conversation right now because of the power of Zoom. And two, you can find those communities, even if they're not, in a 30-mile radius or meter radius, from your home. It's incredible. I think, and I will share my personal experience. I was so scared to say, hey, by the way, world, I know I was a research professor for years and worked in corporate America, but life plot twist, I'm also an intuitive medium. But it still felt right? So my heart was pulling me in that direction. And as soon as I did that, I had people from all walks of my life, from the corporate side, from the academia side, from childhood, reaching out and saying like, thank you so much for sharing. I've had these experiences too. Could we grab a cup of coffee? Right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So the more that we let ourselves be ourselves, it creates space for others to do the same.
That's so beautiful. I absolutely love that. And I was reading in your bio, it might have been on your website, that you are also trained as a shaman. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I have a really hard time like saying, like identifying like I am a shaman. I feel like I am a learner of life, and I've been so honored to be in circles where these deeply sacred traditions have been shared. And what it has looked like so far, and I think it's a lifelong, multiple lifetimes, probably a journey, is to really tune in. It was a specific training called Moonrise, and it's currently in person, and it was in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was phenomenal. So talking about community, there's a group of about 20 of us that were drawn to this. The teacher has trained in Africa and has been like guided to bring this information to everyday modern life while holding that deeply sacred information and honoring that. So it was a year. I mean, I'd like to say a year is, that was kind of like the kickoff. It was a year of intense learnings and going over different modalities and understanding how we're really honoring the interconnectivity of all that's living, really tuning into our connection with nature. How are we honoring that and thanking that in the process? It included shamanic journeying, right? So we're going into deeply meditative states to really tune in to information that maybe our conscious mind isn't giving us the surrendering to connect with, right? It's that's not really where the spreadsheets live in our deep subconscious. And it was such an honor to be in that and to be able to really embody that. It included a lot of work around connecting with our ancestors. And when you think about it, we have, probably 600, 700 ancestors in our lineage, no matter where we are. And I know for me, I knew my grandparents, and that was kind of where that stopped. But when you really think about the interconnectivity and the wisdom that's deep in our bones, and we look at things within science like epigenetic memories, where we can have traumas as well as joys from, 17 generations back that are coming through in our body in this lifetime. It's hard to put it into words, and I hope I captured it. I feel like it's such a deep honor to connect with that and to really walk away from that year knowing that this is really the initiation. And it's, I was honored to be a mentor for this group that came through this year. And it's a lifelong journey, but really tuning into our interconnectivity and acknowledging that not only are we connected from our ancestors and to honor that, but our connection with nature, like it's all interconnected. And what might it feel like for us to honor that as deeply sacred and tune into it more fully?
No, thank you so much for sharing that, Bonnie. That just sounds amazing. And what you were saying before, that where things have been buried for the last, a couple of hundred years ago, is that there's so many of these trainings and opportunities for us to get back to our true selves, our authentic selves, and what nature has intended for us and everything. And I also love that you shared that, people talk about the trauma from our ancestors that are in our bodies, but you said the joy as well. I've not heard that before, and I just really wanted to point that out. That's just beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. We have so much wisdom and in us and honoring our ancestors. And I will share from my, growing up in United States. And, I was very nervous about that work, like, what if I'm calling in the bad stuff? These are the things. And through this reframing is really this deep compassion, and Eva Brene Brown talks about what might it feel like if we looked at the world where we know that everybody is showing up with the best they can with the tools that they have at the time, and to really honor the incredible struggles that our ancestors went through, the joys that they went through, the deep experiences, and to acknowledge that is a big part of us. So how can we really honor honor that. So that's really the first piece of it, is really honoring our lineage. And how can we support even more growth moving forward?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so much goodness in this conversation today, Bonnie. It's so wonderful of you to share everything. We're almost up for time. It always goes so quickly, but I have one final question that I want to ask, that I ask all of my guests. When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do?
What a great question. I'm going to tune into that one for a second. I try to get really still. I try to go and, if possible, get in nature. And for me, that might be just walking in the backyard without my shoes on. Take a few deep breaths deep into my heart, in my heart space, and deep into my belly, and just let myself get really still. And in that, I'm able to get regrounded pretty quickly with it. Yeah. What a great question. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all of your wonderful... Did you hear one more thing?
I did want to share one other thing for everyone listening, that time and time again in the research, people share that they feel strongly that we are all deeply connected with our intuition, and to really honor yourself and trust yourself in the process. Nurture what needs to be nurtured, give love, make sure that you're healing yourself in that process, but to really acknowledge that we have this deep wisdom that we're connected to, and what might that feel like, to really honor that and celebrate the heck out of it in our everyday lives. So I just wanted to share that final piece.
Oh, thank you. That's a wonderful, wonderful thought to leave us with. Thank you, Bonnie. And where can people find you if they want to know more?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to find me would be on my website, so intuitivebynature.com. I'm also on Instagram at that same handle. So reach out. I even have on my website, we obviously can do readings. I occasionally will host a mentorship, sharing the research. But I even have a button where we could just have a coffee chat if you want to talk about this more, to acknowledge that we are far from alone, and let's keep coming together in community.
Lovely. And I'll pop all those links in the show notes. Thank you again, Bonnie.
Oh, it's such a joy to be here. Thank you so much, Rose.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Sensitive CEO Show. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you think it would be useful for someone else, please leave me a review on sensitiveceo.show. Just follow the prompt in the menu. Each month, I'm offering one lucky reviewer a chance to win a 1-hour business and mindset audit with me. This in-depth audit covers the 5 pillars of your online business, and you'll walk away with super clear action steps specifically for you and your business. You'll be re-energized and motivated to step into your greatness. You'll also find all of the show notes for each episode on the website sensitiveceo.show. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to the short and sweet newsletter. You'll get weekly recommendations and tips, especially for HSPs, empaths, and introverts. And as the name implies, the email is short and sweet. The Sensitive CEO Show, igniting your sensitive superpowers.